Hello everyone, welcome back to Molecular Biology and Biotechnology with Lucy. Today we'll be talking about proteins. And we said that proteins are biopolymers or macromolecules or biomolecules that are usually made up of smaller units that we call alpha amino acids. And these amino acids are joined together by covalent bonds that we call peptide bonds. So if this is alpha amino acid 1, it is joined together to another amino acid, and these bonds are what we call peptide or amide bonds, and they are covalent bonds. Now, proteins are very important in the body. We call them the body's building blocks because there are very many, and almost every part of the cell or any activity that is going on in the cell is going to be involving one or more proteins. Now, they can be categorized or classified into two. That is nutritional, based on nutritional quality, and based on physiological function. Now, we start with nutritional quality, and we have something called a complete protein. Complete proteins usually consist of the 9 essential amino acids. Now, essential amino acids refers to the fact that the body cannot make them, so they are needed from the diet. And these are the 9 essential amino acids. We have what we call histidine, we have isoleucine, we have leucine, we have lysine, we have methionine, phenylalanine, threonine, tryptophan, and valine. We'll be looking at them in more details in our next lesson, but these are the 9 essential amino acids, and they are needed, or they are found mainly in animal sources. For example, in meat, in eggs, in milk. And they are complete because it consists of all the 9. Then we have other proteins that are called incomplete, and that means they are lacking either one or more of the essential amino acids, and most of these come from plant sources. We have what we call supplementary. Supplementary is a form of incomplete protein, such that this one we must add a complete protein for it to become important in the body or useful in the body. Then we have what we call high biological value proteins. These ones usually consist of, they are foods that consist of at least 50% of protein. For example, animal sources like eggs will have more protein, that is about 50 and above percent. But then those of low biological value, it means they have less than 50% of the protein. For example, vegetables. Someone may ask, do vegetables actually have proteins? Yes, they do, but they have very little amount of protein, and that is why we call them low biological value foods. Now, in terms of physiological function, we usually have what we call enzymatic proteins, and these ones catalyze reactions, or they accelerate chemical reactions. For example, in the digestive system, we have digestive enzymes, which are proteins that usually help to hydrolyze food. For example, in the mouth, we have something we call salivary amylase that is usually used to digest food in the mouth as it is being eaten. Then we have what we call transport proteins, and this means they transport something, a substance, from one place to another. For example, oxygen is transported in a protein we call hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is the protein that transports oxygen from our lungs into other parts of the body through the blood. We also have something we call myoglobin, and this one does the same function of transporting oxygen, but now to muscles, to muscles. We have hormonal proteins. Hormonal proteins are used to regulate chemical processes. For example, we have a hormone called insulin that regulates the amount of blood glucose. So the blood glucose that is circulating in your system is regulated by this hormone that is produced in the pancreas. And this is now, once it has a problem, that is when we usually have the issues of diabetes, because it means your blood glucose goes very high as it is not being regulated. Then we have storage proteins. These ones usually will store amino acids. For example, we have casein. It stores protein in milk. We have ferritin. It stores iron in the body of animals and even some bacteria. We have structural proteins. Structural proteins will form the structural component of various tissues, connective tissues in the body. For example, we have a major one called keratin. Keratin is in our hair, it is in our fingernails, it is in feathers of birds, and this one usually forms the structure of the hair and all that. We also have another thing that is a structural protein called collagen in our connective tissues. Then we have receptor proteins. Receptor proteins usually enhances the cell's response to chemical stimuli. For example, I have put a cell here. This is a cell, and then it has some receptor proteins on the surface. So if this is a nerve cell that is here and it is producing neurotransmitters or signal molecules, then this receptor protein is going to receive the signal molecule and it will cause a certain information to be transmitted into the cell. That is what we call receptor proteins. We have contractile. These ones help the body to move, to contract. For example, we have actin and myosin, and these ones are important in our skeletal muscle. Then we have what we call defensive. Defensive protects the body against pathogens. For example, against viruses, against bacteria, against any other form of unwanted particles in the body. So, for example, we have what we call antibodies. And antibodies are important because they fight. They are the body's soldiers. They fight against those invading pathogens. We have other forms of proteins. We have, so for example, the ones we discussed when we were talking about DNA called histones. Histones help in the packaging of DNA into chromatin, and then chromatin will form chromosomes. And then we also have the snake venom is a form of a toxic protein. We have others that come from plants that are useful in making certain substances like monelin. Monelin is a sweetener. It comes from African plants and it is extremely sweet, and it is utilized in making certain sweeteners. So these are some of the physiological functions that we have of proteins, and you can see they are cutting across almost major functions of our body, and that is why we say that proteins are the building blocks of the body. So that is the introduction to proteins. In our next lesson, we'll be talking about amino acids, these ones, so that now we are more clear about these ones that we have mentioned here. Probably some of you are wondering what these are all are, but now those are amino acids that we'll be talking about in our next lesson. Thank you so much. See you in our next lesson.